Welcome to the University of Northampton Popular Music Podcast. Hi there, my name is Dr. Stace Constantino. I'm a senior lecturer and the programme leader for popular music at the University of Northampton. I'm here with Gareth Jones. I'm lucky enough to be in his studio.
Welcome, Stace. Really nice to see you here. Really nice to have you.
British music producer and mixer and professional noisemaker.
There you go.
And you've been active from the 80s right up until today.
70s, actually. I think I started late 70s in music recording. Yeah.
And you've done just some of your credits, which there's a lot. So these are the highlights I got from your website. 5 albums with Depeche Mode, 6 albums with Erasure. You've worked with Wire, Einstürzende
Neubauten,
Nick Cave, Die Amanda Gallis.
There's a little picture of her outside in the hallway, actually.
Oh,
a little poster from back in the day that I found in the cupboard.
Okay. Right, sorry about the mispronunciation.
It's all right.
Golf Rap.
Yeah, there you go. Remix.
New Order.
Remix.
Orbital.
Remix.
And you've got 19, if I'm not incorrect, 19 gold discs.
Could be, yeah.
That's
I don't
what I
know.
counted.
Yeah, I don't have the gold discs physically anymore. They're just on the website. I didn't know what to do with them, so I offered them back to the fan clubs. And I think we did a long time ago now, but I think we did like an auction for charity. The fan club took the gold disc, and then a fan probably bought it, and the money went to charity, which seemed like a nice home for the gold discs, you know.
Perfect, but nevertheless they're yours, aren't they? So,
yeah, it's a nice accolade.
Yeah. Okay. So
that's me.
I know, amazing. And that's just some of you.
In a nutshell, that's me in a nutshell.
There's a lot more actually.
Good.
So if I've missed anything out that you want to highlight, please let me know. But there was so much on your bio.
If anyone's very interested, they can obviously just check the website where there's a reasonably up-to-date bio.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've enjoyed more recently than a lot of that stuff is wonderful music from the 80s that I was privileged to be a part of, 80s and 90s. More recently, I worked with Interpol and the Grizzly Bear, and had a great working relationship with that French musician Jan Tiersen that I've made a bunch of records with as a engineer and a producer. Yeah.
Brilliant. And all the links to stuff that we talk about today will be in the text below. So if you want to have a look and follow through, they're all in there for you, for our listeners. All right, so my first question to you is, how did you get into music?
Into music?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I grew up with music. My dad was a big classical music lover.
Right.
So pop music was considered pretty much, pop culture, I should say, in my mum and dad's house was basically considered to be rubbish.
Right.
So, but classical music, high culture, whatever you want to call it, whatever
Beethoven,
they called it.
Mozart,
there you go.
Haydn.
Bach, Brahms, that classical music my dad loved. As a true Welshman, as a bit of a cliche, but a lot of love for music in Wales, singing and music. So I guess he was probably playing records from almost as soon as he could afford to buy one. From when I was really little, and interestingly, for many years I thought, having carved out a little career in rock and roll and pop music, that I was rebelling against my parents, as you do when you're a youngster.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 40, I thought, hang on a minute, what was one of the things my dad really loved? And it was obviously listening to records.
Yeah.
So actually I spent my life making records, which is not the kind of records perhaps my dad would have loved, but he did love listening to records. So in a sense, it wasn't a rebellion at all.
In a way,
I was trying to make Dad happy by making things he loved. So I thought that was in my own way, yeah.
And did you ever have music lessons? Did he teach you singing?
No, not from my dad. I mean, went to school in the 60s.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 70s, the UK was one of the most equal countries financially in the world, in the rich world.
Sure.
We had the least disparity between rich and poor, and obviously now actually we're one of the worst in the rich countries. I think second only to America, where the disparity is highest. But in the 60s and 70s, education and social services and social housing and everything was quite well supported in this country. So I'm saying I had the privilege of having a pretty good state education. And at our school, we had like a school orchestra, and then you could have music lessons like extra if you were vaguely interested. I used to go once a week and play a bit of trumpet or French horn with a professional musician who was also a teacher, who came in once a week to teach the kids. So I never, my parents were like moving into the middle classes, and so it's quite aspirational. A lot of their friends' kids had piano lessons. And I was really glad that I didn't have to have piano lessons, because most of my friends didn't seem to enjoy it. But looking back, actually, it would have been quite nice to have had piano lessons. But I did play the piano quite a lot, badly. I enjoyed it.
You had one at home, did you?
My mum had, her piano came from her mum's house, I think, at some stage. And I got a lovely I've got a big multi-sample version of my mum's piano that I use on the electrogenetic record, actually.
Oh, really?
All the piano on the electrogenetic record is my mum's piano, quite badly tuned. One day I went home with a little recorder like yours, and I just played every key, like loud, soft and quiet, and then I made like a big multi-sample patch. So that's quite a nice personal piano that's on.
Oh, that's the good.
So,
even nicer.
So because obviously as a teenager I spent a lot of time banging out chords on the piano, So just as part of the normal state, I sung in the school choir. Just as part of the normal state education, the arts were quite well supported. Actually, it was encouraged and supported. No, it wasn't considered to be something not worth pursuing. I mean, I was never supposed to go into the arts for a job. But still, as part of a normal state education, there was a school orchestra, and we had rehearsals after school, and loads of us went along, and they lent you instruments. You didn't have to buy your own instruments, It's pretty cool, actually, looking back. And I think I did O-level music. There's O-level, 15, whatever they're called now. I did
GCSE, I think.
GCSE music at 15 as well. So, and then that was it. Then after that, I carried on probably in the school orchestra and the school choir till I left school. But then really I went more down the science route, because I was very passionate and interested about it. About physics and maths and chemistry, as a kid. So that's the little bit of the background.
So that leads me on to my next question then. It's about the BBC. But I suppose, do you think to some extent, before we get there, physics, maths and music are related on some level?
I think physics and maths are related to everything.
Right, okay.
Actually, the cosmos, I think, is, I mean, we're all physics and maths, right? And as we understand even more, as people understand even more about physics and maths, I mean, we are physics and maths.
But like Pythagorean.
Or more deeper than that, even, isn't it? It's quantum physics. I mean, it's the miracle of life comes from physics and maths, probably somewhere. But what do I know? But yeah, but there is a connection. I mean, there's this whole thing with Bach being like very mathematical. Architecture in sound, or whatever it's called. Is it? Maybe, and so it turned out, and obviously acoustics is part of music. I've always been very interested in how music sounds in a space, as well as how it sounds in a dry acoustic. Which is a lot of my early work. I was playing synthesizers into amplifiers and into rooms, because I was interested in the acoustic space around the instruments. I suppose I got that from orchestral music. No sound exists in a vacuum. It exists in an acoustic space of some kind. So obviously acoustics, and I guess that's some maths and physics. That's got a lot to do with music, actually. But basically what happened more in my personal development was I went to college and studied science, and lots of it I really enjoyed. The practical side I was particularly good at. The theoretical side kind of got on top of me a bit. I think I was leading a bit of a party student lifestyle, and I had other interests. So I didn't really keep up with all the theoretical work, and a growing love for recorded music and listening to my stereo kind of emerged, and I thought when I left college, I thought I didn't know what to do. Like a lot of students, I suppose, I didn't really know what to do. I knew I felt very passionate about studios and recordings, but I didn't know how to get a job in one. I had an opportunity, I went to what's it called, the RAF recruiting office somewhere in London, because I thought, I could join the RAF for 3 years and see the work, whatever. I don't know what I thought. But I went in the office and they said 9 years, and I thought, no, I can't do that. So I thought that was too much.
Was that for the engineering training?
No, I didn't know what to do,
Yeah.
And then I had an IBM bursary when I was at college, and I went to IBM to possibly get a job because I worked for IBM in my summer vacations. But I was a bit of a freak by the time I left college, and even turning up at the interview, I looked like a freak. And IBM, of course, in those days, it wasn't Apple, it was corporate, very corporate, So they didn't even offer me a job.
Right.
Thank God. A job at Apple might have been fun, but I don't think I would have fitted into the corporate environment.
No.
So, and I wrote to all the recording studios in London that I could find in some book.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a single reply.
No.
So then I didn't know what to do. And then my dad was a teacher at the secondary school where I went to. One of his pupils was head of BBC Sound in Scotland.
Right.
And my dad asked him for some advice, because I thought, well, maybe I should apply to the BBC. Maybe I could get in there. And the BBC was a bit more receptive to getting a CV as well. Sending a CV to a recording studio is not really a way to get a job. They're not interested in the GCSEs I got or anything like that. No. The way to get a job in a recording studio in the 70s was to knock on the door and go and meet people and say, hello, I'm really keen, I'll do anything.
Yeah. T-boy.
What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
I think that might even be a lot of it now, even the way to get a job in the industry is to meet people, But I hadn't really worked that out.
No.
I thought I had to write to people with my CV.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, this guy who was at BBC Scotland said, well, I can't possibly get your son a job.
No.
Because there's a procedure you have to go to.
Yeah.
He said, but if he signs up, this is the thing he has to do. This is where he needs to apply. And he said, I will do everything I can to encourage them to at least give him an interview, which was very kind of him.
Brilliant.
So no, I don't think any rules were broken or anything.
No.
But he pointed me in the right direction. And so then I managed to get a job as a technical operator in Broadcasting House. Right. And I still wanted to record music.
Yeah.
And so I thought, maybe this is a way to do it.
Yeah.
So I managed to get a job at the BBC. I progressed through that a little bit. I got fantastic basic training of loads of stuff I didn't know anything about, like how to make a microphone go through a mixing desk and come out of a speaker.
Yeah.
That was a huge achievement the first time I did it.
Yeah.
So I progressed through that, managed to get a job internally. I applied for a job as a studio manager, which eventually would have allowed me to record music. And but at the beginning, I was just doing like very simple talk radio at the World Service at Bush House, and everyone was super nice and super professional. And again, the BBC was really well funded in those days. It was incredible, not for my wages, but for the equipment and the facilities were just fantastic. Now, I'm still a big fan of public service broadcasting. Actually, I think it has a super valuable role that in this country we don't appreciate. A lot of us don't appreciate enough. That we don't understand how valuable and special it is, because there's no shareholders and there's no advertising. I think it puts a different slant on things. Anyway, it turned out that in order to record if I wanted to record music at the BBC, I'd probably have to wait like another 7 to 10 years before I was going to get a chance.
Right.
Because they've got their route. They've got their ladder, that's right, State. They've got their career ladder, and that's what you go through. Yeah. Fair enough. So I started moonlighting. I wrote to all the studios in London again, and I got one response, not from a studio I'd written to, but from a guy who was working in a studio that I'd written to, Berwick Street or Basing Street or somewhere, and the man's name was Mike Finesilver, and he was a producer and musician, and he owned a small 8-track studio, really small, in Stoke Newington, and he gave me a break. He gave me the opportunity. He said, he looked at it and he thought, I think the studio manager said, "Oh look, were you looking for someone to come and work at Pathway?" It was called, and they gave him my CV, and he thought, "Oh, it's not too bad. At least they got the BBC on the bottom, you know."
Sure,
so he thought I might understand what a microphone was, or something. So he very kindly gave me a break. He invited me to meet him. I had a coffee or something with him, and he showed me his little studio and explained how it worked a little bit, and basically threw me in the deep end. There was no assistants in that studio. It was a little 8-track studio. There was one engineer and the band. So that's how it all started. He was one of my early mentors, Mike. Thanks, Mike. If you ever hear this, thanks for helping me out. So I was moonlighting. So basically I was doing 2 jobs because I didn't have the guts to give up the job at the BBC straight away. But then I was doing like 40 hours a week or more at the 8-track studio as well as the BBC job.
Oh, he must have
and
been
then
really
after,
tired.
well, I was young, you know, you've got loads of energy when you're young, haven't you?
Yeah.
So then after about 6 months or 9 months, I thought, well, actually, I could even do more work at the studio because it was all like freelance.
Yeah.
So I gave up the BBC job, and I said to my line manager that I'd love to stay at the BBC, but I felt I couldn't wait all those years before I needed to go and record music. That's what I wanted to do, you know. I loved music. Meanwhile, I'd moved away from mum and dad's classical thing. You know, when I was a teenager, I thought only classical music was proper music. But then I discovered like jazz and two-tone music and reggae and rock and roll and loads of bands. So, you know, I was clear that I was up for this thing. So, yeah, that's how. So then that was it. Bye-bye to the BBC. Now I'm just a licence fee payer and a keen listener.
And you never returned to the BBC to work?
Never returned to work, no.
No.
And
have you recorded classical as well? Because it's a different process for classical recordings, isn't it?
Not really. I've done the odd orchestral session as a record producer,
right.
You know, where we've kind of blagged it and said it, you know, and got a good result.
Yeah.
And I've obviously recorded loads of like chamber, like string quartets and different things, you know, flutes. It's more like chamber classical. But obviously recording an orchestra is a speciality in itself. I mean, and when I was younger, we had a go because that's what, you know, if I was responsible for a big recording studio budget now, a big orchestral budget now, I would obviously ask a professional to come and help run the session because it makes it a lot easier.
So you started in the 70s, and then when was it you moved to independent? Was it in the 70s or 80s then? Because you became part of the new wave movement, is that right?
Well, I don't know.
Or was that a bit later?
Well, I don't know if I became part. I was basically a jobbing engineer, and I'm very excited, learning my craft on the go, learning a lot from musicians. You know, I didn't really know even that much about drum kits or anything. No. You know, like the first time I recorded a proper drum kit, you know, the drummer asked me to turn the snare drum up, and I didn't know which one was the snare drum. Kind of thing, man.
How did you get around that?
Well, I just turned it. No, he said, no, the snare drum. I thought, oh yeah, it must be the other one. You know, kind of thing, almost.
Brilliant, yeah.
That kind of level, you know.
Sure,
I did.
yeah.
I'm learning tons from all the musicians because that's the scene. It's a tiny. It was a bit of a legendary studio Pathway, 8-track analog, 1-inch tape. Home-built echo plate we had that we were very proud. Even I think Barry Farmer was the engineer. I think even the mixing desk was home-built. Or custom built, you might say, but you know, but it wasn't posh at all. It was an old wrestler's gym. Right. So there was me trying to record bands, and then there was the musicians. So obviously I was learning all I could from in downtime, like playing with the equipment to understand how it might work and how it was all connected up and lining up the tape machines and doing a lot on my own. But most of it was learning from the musicians and, well, what do they want? What do they want? you know. And Mike actually gave me a fantastic piece of advice, I think, which I still quote to this day. He said, don't worry about it too much, he said, as long as you can get the music on tape, that's obviously essential. But he said the main thing is if you get on with the musicians. He said, because if you don't get on with the musicians, you're not going to last 5 minutes in this business or something. He wasn't horrible. He was really nice. He said, you know, if you make the musicians feel welcome and at home and accommodated, and because there was a bit of a, I don't know if it still exists because I don't work in these kind of spaces anymore, but there seemed to be quite a lot of small studios that were run by little fascists. So there was, at that time, it seemed, from the musicians I met, it seemed there were quite a lot of small studios that were run by engineers who were like saying, this is how you do it, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And, you know, I'm talking about the late 70s here. I wasn't a punk, I was more like a late hippie. I was like a psychedelic hippie dude. But still, this punk ethos of do-it-yourself was emerging big time. So no one really, all the young musicians I was working with, no one was in the mood to be told what they could and couldn't do in a recording studio. And I was very interested in trying new shit, like I still am actually. And so it was, to me, it was self-evident that if a musician who was basically the client, let's face it, wanted to try something, I was like, oh, that's interesting, let's try it. So that seemed to go down quite well, because as I said, I met a lot of people where the sound engineer, apparently in the facilities they've been working in, wanted to be in charge of everything and telling people how it can and cannot be done, and that wasn't very creative. So I was like a sponge, you know, trying to learn everything from young musicians. And because of the little studio I was working in, nothing to do with me really, I got exposed to a lot of different musicians and bands, because the recording sessions were generally quite short. You know, people would come in to make a single and it might be like a couple of days, and that would be it, you know, because there's kind of low budget. It wasn't like people were coming in for like a month to make a single or anything. And the studio had a reputation, nothing to do with me, but it had a reputation for getting quite good results and being functional and a place where you could go and do something quite good. And there was an artist called John Fox who was the lead singer in Ultravox for the first 3 albums, and he'd left Ultravox and gone solo. He wanted to make a solo record. I think he lived not far from Pathway, and he came to the studio to check it out, to consider making his first solo record, and that's how we met. And that was really my introduction to what you call in the new wave, I suppose. Okay, sure. Whatever. He was would he describe himself as a new romantic, possibly? New romantic rock. I don't know but John definitely had connections to the new romantic scene, and he came out of the punk world. And there were still punk bands coming to Pathway. Anyway, I met John. I probably came to do like a test recording, and I thought it was like super interesting, because it was he had just electronics really, electronics and vocals, and he had like a little drum machine and a little sequencer and one synth and one string machine and a flanger, I think, and that was it. And he was a very cool dude. He seemed to me to be hugely experienced compared to, he'd already made 3 records, you know, and I hadn't even recorded and mixed a whole album. And he was a bit older than me, but he seemed like very experienced to me at that stage. So I guess I ticked enough boxes with him for him to commit to making an album there. I was as a young engineer, I'm working for him, and so that was my introduction to. I might have made some other electronic records in Pathway, a little bit electronic, but I don't really remember, because this was the big one. This was the first record that I recorded and mixed from top to bottom. So that was great. He gave me he put his trust in me, basically, I suppose, and his money. I suppose he's paying the studio. So, and I was getting paid by the studio as a freelancer. And we made this album, Metamatic, that was amazing fun to make, you know. And I invited a couple of friends to play me. I mean, I was definitely not a producer on this record. I was a beginner. But John spoke about different musicians, and I invited a couple of friends of mine to play on it, where he said, should we try a bass on this one? I was sharing a flat with a bass player at the time, and I invited him to come in, and he did a couple of sessions, and I knew a very talented multi-instrumentalist called John Wesley Barker, and he came and played some keyboards on a couple of the tracks. So it was amazing, really. It was just, we were just learning so fast and exploring and having loads of fun. And that was the record. So that was my introduction to this contemporary electronic music scene in London, electro pop.
And so was that with Ultravox or not yet?
No, this is
not yet.
John's left Ultravox now.
I see, okay.
He's done 3 records with Ultravox. He's left and he's striking out on his own as a solo project. John Fox, yeah.
So I've got a following question for you about this little intersection world.
Okay.
Which your talk has made me think about. So I was just a little boy when punk was happening and this shift was going over. But I remember these, let's say, electro pop. I loved Depeche Mode. I loved all that synth music. Yeah. But I sort of just missed punk. Yeah. I was a bit too. But so what I've read in the history books is that punk split into, and you can tell me this is what you're saying is interesting. So it kind of split into pub rock punk and art house punk, but it also went into electronics. So so what seems to be happening is that punk has this DIY aesthetic, do it yourself. So is that where this album came from? Someone wanted to do it on their own. It wasn't punk music, but it was from the punk. I'm going to do it myself.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That's when I say totally. That's what I took from the punk aesthetic. Yeah. And that's what a lot of us took, I think, at the time. Even those of us who weren't making punk music. Yeah. This idea. Yeah. And of course, it went along with emerging vaguely affordable technology, right? Yeah. Yeah. It was at this time, electronic, synthesizers were becoming available. That, like the Wasp, there was a Wasp. My friend John Wesley Barker purchased a Wasp. Yeah. That was kind of and he, as a jobbing semi-unemployed musician in the 70s, it was, if you wanted it, you could get one. Yeah. So and this idea of making it yourself, I did a little film soundtrack with John Wesley Barker, Simon Limbrick and Ali Robinson in our flat on a 4-track tape recorder. Like this one? Yeah, like this one. Yeah. Where we could, again, on this idea that, yes, we can actually just do it ourselves. Because until that time, really, if you wanted to make a commercially acceptable recording, you had to go into like a big recording studio. Yeah. And I mean, we did work in a lot of big recording studios as well later. But for me, that was a really big thing. You know what? A lot of the early electro pop, is working because the machines are helping make the music. A lot of the early sequenced Depeche Mode stuff, no one could really play. So the machine itself was a huge liberating tool for us. The fact that we could use a sequencer allowed us to construct sound worlds that otherwise wouldn't have existed. Yeah. They weren't being used as a substitute for musicians. They were empowering tools. Yeah. There was a thing, the Musicians' Union was very nervous about synthesizers and stuff when they emerged, because they thought that synthesizers were trying to take musicians' jobs. Yeah. But from my perspective and from our perspective, a lot of us felt that these new tools were empowering us to be musicians, which we wouldn't have been able to be without the emerging electronics. So and that's kind of building on this part of the punk aesthetic, which is saying, actually, you know what, we can actually just do it. Okay. We don't need someone to give us permission to do it. We don't need to do it in any particular way that you might want to tell us to do it. We are actually just going to do it. So that was great. That was being able to to have that spirit in society kind of encouraged us, I think. Perhaps we didn't even know how much it encouraged us at the time.
No.
But there was this feeling that, you know what, out with the old. Like a lot of young people have this anyway. Out with the old. Here we go. We're going to do it our way, kind of thing.
So that explains then how you get from punk sound to electronic sound, because if you just listen to it from someone who wasn't there, so how did you get from raucous punk to electronic synth pop? I mean, and then there's industrial music as well, which is your German connection. I was going to ask you about that. I can see how the machine comes into that. That still has quite a punky vibe to it. A lot of it, industrial music, doesn't it? Yes,
I suppose. I mean, punk's interesting, isn't it? Because yes, there was a lot of outrage caused, and so. But I mean, I had if when I went back, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago or something, listening to a Sex Pistols song, like I just thought, it's perfect pop. It's like little melodies, perfect little pop structures, little melodies on it. Doesn't even sound that raucous or offensive anymore. It's just like distorted guitars. So what, you know? But at the time, obviously, the image was. I think even Chris Thomas or some legendary producer worked on the Sex Pistols, who was very experienced, worked with Pink Floyd and people. You know, he was like a top commercial producer. But that wasn't really apparent to us at the time. It just seemed like a new wave of revolution, you know. But in many ways, it's like perfect pop. I just want to... John was art school.
Right.
John Fox was art school guy.
Okay, right.
Very clever in many ways. One of the ways he was very clever was he wanted to, for his solo record, he wanted to make a minimal record. And he'd worked in quite big studios before with Ultravox, worked with Connie Plank, I think, and Brian Eno, and been in big 24-track studios, and really. But he wanted to make a minimal record, and conceptually, the way that he did that was by using a minimal toolkit, which is kind of really obvious to us now. But I thought it was really and I didn't understand at the time what he was doing. It was only looking back I thought, oh, that was clever. So he thought, minimal record, okay, I'll go to an 8-track studio, because already that's going to force me to be more minimal. And then he just had, as I mentioned, just a few instruments. So there's all kinds of things. John wasn't a punk. He was like from the art school background, and Ultravox was like an art rock new wave band. I don't know how you want to describe them. But it wasn't the Sex Pistols or the Clash or anything. It was a different kind.
But it was the same spirit.
Maybe it was coming out at the same time, you know.
Same ethos.
But also because of his art school. I don't know if it was because of that, but because he came from this fine arts perspective, he had a concept, I think, looking back. Minimal record, minimal toolkit. And necessarily then you finish up with a minimal record. So, which he did actually, so there you go.
It's still a useful thing to do today, isn't it? Limit yourself to certain things.
Isn't it? Wonderful. It's helped me a lot. Yeah, it's helped me a lot. To this day, it helps me a lot in my writing and my productions. Yeah, really good. You know, we do my electronic, I mean, jumping forward 4 decades, my electronic improvisation project, Sunroof, with my friend Daniel, is one of the ways we limited ourselves with that is we make live improvisations in the studio or on stage, and then we have stereo, there's 2 of us play, and we both have a stereo output, and that's how we record it. So we've already like massively limited it. And then we listen to the recording afterwards, and if we like it, we use it. We might edit it a little bit. Usually then we cut a bit off if it's too long, simple as that, because we realised that if we got into complex multi-track work, we'd never get anything finished. So the way that we encouraged ourselves to actually get stuff finished, and we've just finished our 3rd record now, so it is working, is by doing these improvisations in a very limited kind of way. We time limited ourselves as well, Stokes. We said okay, we get together after work, maybe at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening. We'd have like a 3 or 4 hour session. We'd build a piece, record it, and that would be it. So we had lots of constraints. We had constraints from the equipment, constraints from the way that we recorded it, constraints on the production method, which was going to be no mixing, really no production, just some editing allowed if necessary. And all these limitations, I mean, I've known Daniel since '82 when we met, when he was producing Depeche Mode, and it's the first time we've managed to successfully finish music together, because we put these massive constraints, and we don't feel creatively or artistically constrained.
No.
We feel we're boldly going to new areas where we've never been before, you know. So it's not like but it's by constraining the process that we've been able to find new music, and it's really, so I can't. It's hard to. You can only be passionate about it and talk about your own history, but it's quite hard with a lot of the young producers and beat makers and musicians today, because everyone's used to a DAW, which essentially has unlimited tracks. So saying to them, look, if you could limit yourself to 16 tracks, you might find you finish some awesome music. I've got a couple of productions I've done with Spiritual Friendship and with Naos Alpha. The last 2 records we did, I came in as the kind of old guy in the project, and I suggested very strongly that we might limit ourselves to 16 tracks. And both my friend Chris and my friend Nick looked at me like I was a lunatic initially, and somehow I managed to sell them the idea, and the last 2 records we did were basically 16 track projects, 16 tracks in a DAW, 16 stereo tracks. Okay. So in old money that would be 32 tracks. But you know, whatever. We track limited, and it really helped us get stuff done.
Did you bounce within that? Did you bounce down
sometimes?
Stereo?
But a lot of the time we found that was just enough tracks. You know what? That's enough. You know. So, you know, if there's any young beat makers and producers listening, and they're getting stuck, try limiting yourself in some way. Try using 1 instrument, or try saying, I'm just going to make something with 8 tracks and 2 instruments, or anything. It doesn't matter. Try saying, I'm going to complete a piece in 4 hours. Anything to just limit yourself. Anything to limit yourself away from this infinite set of possibilities we've got in the. I mean, obviously. I think a recording studio is a state of mind now. Anyone can make a recording studio with a little laptop or an iPad or a phone even, anywhere in the world. But still, the modern laptop's over capable. It can be daunting. You know, and it, not only is it daunting, even if you're not scared of it, you just go with it. It's really easy to finish up with 25 half-finished ideas that you're going to finish later.
That's true.
And that's no good. You know,
it's really true.
Steve Jobs said, and it's about software, I guess, and hardware at Apple, Steve Jobs said, real artists ship, which, you know, we've taken on board to mean real artists complete stuff and they put it out in the world. And I think that's just so important to understand that. You've got to complete stuff. And complete it, put it on your own Bandcamp. Put it on your own little label. That's fine, that's completed.
Publish and be damned.
It doesn't matter. I'm not saying it has to be on a big label.
No.
Just complete it and move on to the next project. My first discovery, I think I had a little bit of a Beatles phase when I was very young, but not really the music, just the I think I had a plastic Beatles wig even, you know, as a kid.
Little guitar.
But Simon and Garfunkel, that was a Bridge Over Troubled Water. I think that was the first piece. Oh, and also Leonard Cohen. When we were at school, we organised a school trip to the Royal Albert Hall, and we did it on our own without any teachers coming. We rented a van, we bought the tickets. So I think I saw Leonard Cohen in the Royal Albert Hall in about 1969 or something, which was my first non-classical gig, if you like. But I'm with you totally. Someone's legendary, isn't it? Like Miles Davis. Someone said there's only, you know, as you said, there's only 2 kinds of music. There's good music and shit music.
There's bad pieces by Mozart. And good pieces by Jimi Hendrix, obviously, and maybe vice versa. But also there's, and it's an aesthetic. It's a personal choice as well. There's music I love and there's music I don't love, but it's not. But some of it's pop, some of it's jazz, some of it's R&B, some of it's hip hop, some of it's classical. You know, it's. I'm much wider now. As I've got older, I hope
I'm not doing the shutdown and becoming more and more set in my ways. As an artist, I'm trying to grow and expand and older and be open to more and more things. I feel that's been a wonderful part of my personal development, is that I am discovering more and more and more.
Yeah.
And there's just so much to discover, isn't there? So much amazing music out there.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested in the idea of exploring. And I know you've got questions, and we'll get back to them. But I did want to. The thing about exploring that's really big for me is that when you explore, you don't know what you're going to find. And my artistic journey is a lot to do with exploration, and I think that's important, because sometimes we want to hang on to the security of knowing what we're going to. Knowing where we are, knowing what we're going to find. The thing about, I'm not searching for a goal because I don't know what's out there. When you go and explore an unknown territory, you don't know what you're going to find. You might find nothing. You might find dragons. You might find a wonderful lake. Who knows what you're going to find. The point is, you don't know what you're going to find. No. So I'm not on a mission to find something. No. I like to go to areas that I don't know what's there, and then see what happens, see where I get to.
But when you get there, do sometimes you think, you know what, there's nothing here for me? Or do you always find something?
I think.
Do you know when you've found something though?
I feel with writing music and making music, that our job is to explore something, make sure we make a recording, and then maybe listen to it later. Because judging at the time's so hard, right? Okay, yeah. It's really for decades I had a critic sitting on my shoulder that was judging everything that I was doing before I'd even finished it, and telling me basically that it was shit. So I try not to judge what I make anymore. I feel our job as artists is to make stuff and not necessarily to judge it. Other people may or may not judge it themselves, but it's not really my. If I get too caught up in trying to judge my own artistic endeavours as a producer or as a writer or as a whatever, then it shuts me down. It just stops me making anything, because I go, well, it's not Beethoven, or it's not Kraftwerk, or whatever. It's not Herbie Hancock. No. I mean, then I'm. No, it's not actually. What I made is me, though.
That will kill it.
That'll kill it.
Yeah,
straight out the gate. Yeah. I can't even start. No. And I did have decades of that. So I speak from the heart there, from personal experience. For decades, I had unfinished folders of ideas on my computer. Because I was always like comparing myself to the greats. Which wasn't really doing it for me. Because obviously they are great. Yeah, but I'm not trying to be Kraftwerk, Miles Davis, or Beethoven. No, I'm just trying to be me.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And find a little area actually that's not covered, that's unique. A little. I'm not. So, for instance, Sunroof, in my project with Daniel had 10 years as a very capable and in-demand underground techno DJ. But Sunroof don't make techno because it's really well done already. There's loads of people who make amazing techno, minimal techno music. So there's no point in us even trying to enter that field or room. It's done. It's covered already. I feel it's really important to find an area that at least feels a bit unique. Even if 10 years later you find out that someone in New Zealand was doing almost pretty much the same thing. Yeah. But for me, that's important, because then I have a little hope of germinating the seed of the idea, because actually it's not overcrowded, that area of the jungle. There's no one really in that area.
So Electrogenetic, your debut album.
There you go.
Available on Bandcamp.
To
download, and there's cassette and vinyl as well.
There's cassette and vinyl, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to get a vinyl copy.
Thank you very much.
So I really enjoyed listening to it.
Thank you.
The music, but also the sound experience, the quality of the sound, I really, really found awesome. Like the clarity of the mix, but also the depth, and and the sounds and the way it all blended together.
I guess.
And also your panning as well.
I guess.
I know that might sound a strange thing.
Well, it's not. No, it's
really
not
interesting use of movement.
It's electronic music is. I mean, all music's about the sound, isn't it? You know, if we were to go and talk to a flute player, a flute player of my age, say, has probably spent 50 years polishing their sound as well as all their musical knowledge and you know. Yeah. So, so I'm sure that all musicians are fascinated by the sound they're creating and they want to get it right. Obviously, I've spent a lifetime working with recorded sound. And that's my passion, really, the recorded art form. I'm more interested in the recorded art form than in the live. I do like playing live, but so, and again with electronic music, you're starting with like a totally blank canvas, and you can make anything you want. And it seems like the sound and the spatial nature of it and everything, it seems like part of the music in a. They're more deeply connected and embedded, perhaps, than if we were going to say, well, let's get together and record a string quartet. Yeah. Now, obviously, the sound would be really important if we recorded a string quartet, but in a kind of a different way from when we make electronic music, and we're making every voice from nothing and putting them together. And also, the string quartet is a genre that's has expectations around it. I guess it's still free. There's still some freedom in electronic music now. You've still got spaces to explore that haven't been explored yet. There you go, and I know, and there are some very adventurous. Stockhausen put his string quartets in a helicopter. I know, yeah. So, you know, that's... The Arctic quartet. Yeah, there you go. So there is massive experimentation still to do with the string quartet. Sure. But for me, I mean, also electrogenetic, the name is supposed to reflect the nature of the dialogue with the technology. In other words... The music is birthed in the conversation with the technology. That's kind of what I'm going for with the name, you know, to show that, because a lot of my work with modular electronics, you have an idea of something that may be interesting, and then you patch the idea together and you build it, and you get a lot of feedback from the patch that you weren't expecting. Modular electronics works quite well for people, I feel, who want to experiment and explore. If you're the kind of electronic musician who's got a very clear idea that what you want to do is construct a certain sound, making a complex modular patch may not be the best route to go for that, because it's so full of surprise. You get so many surprises come back when you experiment with patching weird. It's like with guitar pedals on the floor. If you patch them all up, it's really interesting. Stuff happens that you wouldn't expect, you know, and that's a big part of my creative journey. And you can lose it. It can be, if you unplug it and you forget what you did, it's gone. And that's what I like about the modular patching, that you have to record it. That also forces me personally to finish stuff, and because if I make you've got to stay into it. If I make like a weird modular patch, I've got it. That's my chance to record it. So then it gets recorded, you know. And quite often, when I come back to it, I think, I'm glad I recorded that. There's something a bit special there. So that's part of the background, I suppose, to the electrogenetic project. And is there a little bit of a spiritual dimension? There seems to be a spiritual dimension. I hope so. To your music. I hope so. Especially comes out in your album. Good. That's what. Even Christian overtones, or. Well, there is a. I'm confirmed, I believe, in the Church of England. I'm not a churchgoer. No. And I wouldn't even describe myself as a. Devout Christian. No. Clearly there's much to love in the teachings of Jesus, as we understand them. And there's much to love and respect in teachings of many of the great prophets of the major religions of the world as we know them. And similarly, there's been much contamination of the teachings of the prophets, right? So I do think I do think and feel there's a lot more to the universe than we currently understand. So there are it's a miracle. The whole thing's a miracle, right, man? I mean, life and the planet, and it's an amazing miracle.
Yeah.
And the immensity of the universe is an unimaginable, ungraspable miracle. And these kind of thoughts and feelings inform my life, and my music, I suppose, and my musical work. There is a biblical text, isn't there, on electrogenetic, which I see what you're getting for the Christian thing in the beginning. Yeah. And for me that was important.
It seemed to be a bit biblical to me.
Yeah, it is biblical. It's it's text from the Bible. Right. And in fact, that piece of text that I read, it's my voice. I went to there's a Wesley chapel around the corner here. I took a little recorder and I sat in the chapel and just recorded it on the little recorder in the chapel. I don't think there was anyone else in there at the time, but I just thought, I was constraining myself with that. I thought, well, what am I going to do? I think I might have tried to read it in my studio, and then it got into take, retake, comping the takes. So then I thought, I know what. I'll go to church. I'll go to a church to record it. And obviously, time's limited. There's visitors coming in and out of the church, tourists, professionals, church professionals are probably knocking about. I just had like 5 minutes, really. Yeah. And then when I came back from the church, I thought, well, that's it. I've done it. Yeah. And that was the end of it. That was like another constraint I put on myself.
So you didn't do much treatment to your voice, or was I going to ask you about that?
I might have done a bit of treatment afterwards, I suppose. But the take... was because I'd forgotten this, but because I limited myself by just going to the church.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I said to you earlier. So what I took from electrogenetic, I got some Christian elements as well as the beautiful music. I got some Christian elements, and like you, from this culturally Christian background.
Okay.
Not, don't go to church or anything, same as you, but and then my wife's from a Hindu background. Yeah. And she was saying, "Oh, I like that music. What's that music? It sounds a bit Indian."
Yeah.
So you've got some. So you must have. You must be touching on something. It just occurred to me. You must be touching on something that taps into people on some level. I
mean, there is. I don't really have a problem using the God word anymore. Okay. I did for years. Yeah. I mean, there is. If there's a God, it's one God, right? Mm-hmm. And we're all praising and respecting the same God, even though some of the different churches will tell us that the other church is wrong and they're right. Yeah. Some of the great spiritual teachers, though, will say that it is one universe and one God that we're all praising together. And I love the way that I don't know much about Islam. I'm very much a novice, but I love the way that in Islam Jesus is also included as an important prophet. So I know that in the wrong circumstances this would get me shot, but I am a subscriber to the one God, the huge infinity of the universe, and I'm not. And over the years, I suppose I've taken a lot from meditation and from my understanding of Buddhism as well. Sure. Okay. So I'm not like a spiritual expert, but I'm on a spiritual quest. Yeah. To be the person I'm supposed to be. That's what I'm trying to be, Stace. I'm trying to become the person that I'm supposed to be, and that's my spiritual journey.
That's fantastic. And you're doing it through music as well,
and that's
which originally was a spiritual activity.
Yeah,
of the muses,
still is. Yeah, for many of us when we're making it and listening to it, right?
I think so.
Some of my most important spiritual experiences have been listening to music. Sometimes it's been church music. Yeah. Sometimes it's been rock and roll. Yeah. So music's obviously very important to us. Actually, it's important to all of us, isn't it?
I think so.
As a species, human beings love beats and melodies and music.
I would say so. Yeah. I would definitely agree about that.
We just don't. Stace, the miracle of life for me already is so incredible that I can't. That I'm gobsmacked by the whole thing. It's like mind blowing. And the more that you pay attention to this miracle of life, the harder it is to understand why we slaughter each other around the planet and why we don't all look after each other a bit better, actually.
I know. So tell me about your meditation practice then. So what sort of meditation do you do?
Well, I have, in the past, I've explored a TM influence meditation with Deepak Chopra's teaching. A teacher has given me a mantra, and I've sat in silence repeating the mantra to myself.
Sure.
That's not something I currently practice.
No.
You know, there's so many different meditations. From Thich Nhat Hanh, I've had this wonderful inspiration of you know, a walking meditation where we can just walk through the countryside in silence and be present, or a breathing meditation where we pay attention to our breath only.
Walking meditation.
You know,
pilgrimage.
I love that. There you go. That's one. I love these. I love. You know, I can do if I'm doing the washing up at home, I can be doing a cleaning meditation. If I'm present, doing the washing up, not doing anything else, not listening to music, not on the phone, just doing the washing, that can be a cleaning meditation. Currently, I'm a big, as we spoke about earlier, I'm a big journaling fan. Right. So most mornings I try to sit down for an hour and write in my journal.
Great.
And that is a form, for me, that's a form of meditation because it's kind of stream of consciousness. Sometimes it veers off into making a few bullet points of things that I need to do later in the day. Sometimes it's been writing my dream down. Sometimes it just turns into some wonderful, very often it turns into a wonderful little journey where ideas and plans and insights emerge. Right. And that's super valuable to me. So of course, and in many ways that's my therapist of many years. She said at some stage, she pointed out to me that she felt that was my morning meditation currently is my journaling practice. So that's great. But going along with that, you know, when I cycle, sometimes if I'm lucky, I have a cycling meditation as I'm on my way to my studio. I'm on my bike, I'm present, I'm in the moment, I'm here, I'm not thinking about what I'm doing tomorrow or later. I'm just being present. The straight spine is very often important, right?
Meditation practice,
It's supposed to be, I don't always do that, but that's a big thing,
So your journal, I was just thinking, because you're an explorer, you said that, and there's a bit of to be an explorer, you need to be a bit brave, don't you? So you're a bit brave.
I hope so.
And so, and through your journal, are you exploring yourself?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say that?
Yeah, very fair. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a brave thing to do, I think.
It's part of my.
I think people don't necessarily do that.
I think it's one of the most important things we can do, isn't it? The Oracle of Delphi.
Know thyself.
Know thyself. Okay, you know, I mean, it's ancient teaching.
Yeah, it's easy to say, not easy to do.
Yeah, it's not easy to do, and it's a work in progress. I think we're all a work in progress, and I hope to be able to carry on with this work in progress for as long as God gives me.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I hope so for all of us. I hope for all of us, Stace,
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you found it enjoyable or interesting, please like and subscribe, and even leave a comment down below if you like.